And welcome back, everybody, to another edition of NB8 right here on Wood TV Plus. Phil Pinarski here, as always, joined once again by AJ Evans. AJ, we had such a fun weekend. We were talking a little bit about it before we started recording today. All-Star Weekend, usually kind of hit or miss in recent years, but I felt like we both kind of agree. It was a great, great weekend. The rest of the weekend was pretty great. The three-point contest was exciting. You were right about who won that one with your pick of Damian Lillard. But again, just overall thoughts to Saturday night, AJ.
Saturday night was great, Phil.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. It was really cool to see. It felt like a lot of the players were excited and happy to be there. The mood seemed just a little more festive than it had in previous years. The dome was really cool. Like, the lighting was awesome. I thought the sequences were great. The three-point competition was electrifying.
Right.
And it's a sign of the times that game or that particular event, I feel like, is probably the most watched, or at least the one that it goes the most viral on social media. But yeah, it was fun. I thought Keyshawn Johnson did a great job in the dunk competition. I loved the dancing, and he was having a terrific time. So that's what it's all about, man. That's what this whole weekend has been about. And like we've talked about so many times, it felt like, I don't want to imply that the athletes lost sight of that, but it just felt like guys weren't having as much fun as they used to. And this weekend felt like a step towards getting back to that. And it was really fun and nice to see.
Yeah, no, I think that's something that I want to fix about myself, too, is saying that the guys don't really seem to care. It feels like it's about the fun. You know, I just felt like guys really weren't having fun, whether it was the All-Star game or the Saturday night fun. You know, I will say this about the dunk contest. It was a little lackluster, for my opinion. But again, you had the rest of that night was super fun. I mean, the shooting challenges were great with all the different teams. You know, Team Knicks won that one.
Yes.
And then again, the three-point contest. I never go back and rewatch the three-point contest. I love rewatching the dunk contest because, you know, kind of a little bit more pizzazz going on there, you know, instead of just guys shooting the ball. But you know, you forget how intense it gets when a couple of guys are competing neck and neck, or when a guy hits, you know, 5 or 6 in a row. That place goes nuts for that. You can really start to feel the momentum. I always forget about that, and it was just great to see that once again on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. And that competition gets competitive.
Right.
Guys really want to win. Like, guys want to advance. They want to make their shots. It's really cool to see because, like we've talked about, even with the rise of social media and everything, it seems like guys still really want to shine in that competition, and nobody wants to get embarrassed. So that was really cool to see, and it was just exciting to see everybody having fun again.
Definitely. Yeah, no, and again, it was nice seeing all the different strategies that teams were using, especially in that three-point contest. I saw somebody break it down that everybody was starting on the opposite side of the three-point line, or you know, on the opposite corner, and so they were having to go all the way around to the different buckets. And Damian Lillard was one of the only guys to start on the opposite side. So every time he was moving, it was right where you want to catch the ball, right in your pocket, and was able to jump straight into his jump shot. So again, you know, different things that kind of go into that is what made it really special to me. And again, it was a great Saturday night, kind of kicked it off. And again, my worries started and really ended with Sunday. What was going to happen during these All-Star games? It was a new format, the world team versus 2 separate United States teams. The U.S. teams kicked everything off. Or they took on the world. You know, they would play against the world teams, then they'd play against themselves, and then a championship would come in the 4th game. Didn't really know how to feel about that. It was a little confusing. I'm even confusing myself right now trying to explain it a little bit. But it was great to see the players, again, caring or having fun with this. I mean, and we said it last week, it might only take just 1 or 2 guys, and we heard it from Anthony Edwards, who ended up being the All-Star Game MVP. He was going at guys. He was talking trash. Victor Wembanyama also was talking a little bit of trash, and you could see that he really wanted to care. So again, it was nice to see these guys and these teams just competing once again. And even there were moments when, you know, guys weren't hustling back on defense, but the excitement was still there. There was still a guy, you know, a hand in everybody's face when they were taking shots. It just felt like a whole different game, really.
Yeah, it really did, Phil. It was it was terrific to see. I really enjoyed the competitiveness. I felt like that was something, like we talked about, was really lacking. But yeah, Wemby went after it. Felt like Anthony Edwards got to it. It felt like a lot of the younger guys were really trying to assert themselves a little bit more, especially towards the end there. So that was really fun and exciting to see. I feel like we're at such a unique place, Phil, because a lot of the younger guys, I think, are really embracing superstardom. I think Anthony Edwards, Wemby, I even feel like Tyrese Maxey, probably VJ Edgecombe within the next couple of years.
Yeah.
I feel like all these guys are like, yeah, I'm here. I'm a superstar. I'm excited to be here. This is my league, or at least I think it is. You know, this is what I want to do. So it felt like those guys really put on that cape on Sunday night and did what they were expected to do. So that was really cool to see. Like we talked about, Phil, I don't think the fans are really asking for much.
No.
I think they just want to see a little bit of excitement, and they want to see, you know, guys be creative and try stuff and have a good time.
Right.
There were times in the past few years where it just seemed like guys didn't want to be there. The effort was so bad, but Sunday was a step in the right direction. I think there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think All-Star Weekend is still a ways away from what it maybe used to be, or even where it could be.
Right.
But it was really nice to see that things are on, I think, an uptick.
Yeah, they can get better. And it was also really cool seeing, I got to be honest, probably the coolest part of the All-Star game was just seeing Kawhi Leonard really turn back the clock.
Yes,
I mean, that one stretch when they were going against the world team and he had like 31 points in that 12-minute game, that's just insane. And it just, again, Kawhi has had a very interesting career. You know, he's been probably named one of the best players in certain seasons and, you know, considered a potential MVP and, you know, could lead his team to the finals. But then in other years, he has kind of taken a step back and people even to the point of forgetting about him. He's been kind of playing really great this year, but people really haven't been talking about him. And I hope that this All-Star game and this performance that he had kind of, again, just bring some more eyes back to Kawhi Leonard and be like, you know what, he's still one of the top 75 greatest players to ever play this game. He was named to that team for a reason, and definitely hope to see him kind of, you know, having another maybe 2019 season with the Raptors when he just was unstoppable, really.
Yeah, Kawhi is always quick, I feel like, to remind people who he is.
Right.
I feel like there are always periods where people sort of forget or where the questions start to arise and where he's maybe not healthy or whatever the case may be. But it was really cool to see him turn back the clock. But I mean, this is what Kawhi does. When he's healthy and locked in, he is as good of a star as there is in the league. So yeah, I mean, and that's his arena. So it was really cool to see.
And what did you really make of the Pistons stars in this one? Again, they ended up on Team Stars, Jalen Duren, Cade Cunningham, and even JB Bickerstaff. They ended up winning the whole thing with Anthony Edwards alongside them. How do you think that specifically Cade and Jalen kind of did in their respective All-Star appearances?
Yeah, I liked what they did. You know, I really liked it. It felt like they were just super happy to be there and were just having fun. I loved what they did. The All-Star game is always so weird just because I feel like certain guys are just inclined to take a bit of a backseat. And it's kind of a little bit harder, I think, for big men to assert themselves just because it's really all about the guards. Those are the ones who have the ball for the majority of the time. But I like what they did. I felt like they got up and down. I thought they increased their intensity when they needed to. And I thought they didn't take away from the team at all. So it was fun to see both of those guys do what they do best. But yeah, I like seeing what they did.
And, you know, I made a pretty big deal last week of just how stacked this world team. They went 0-2 in this All-Star game. Yeah. They lost to both U.S. teams. What do you make of that? Are you surprised? I mean, especially in some of those games where it felt like it could go either way, and they just kind of ran out of gas, honestly.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily surprised just because I honestly feel like this is what the All-Star game is about. You know, it's easy. For a long time, we've talked about this, Phil. It was easy to assume maybe one year, the Western Conference is going to win. They have all these guys. And the East comes back to win. Like, so I wasn't necessarily surprised because I feel like it all comes down to just whoever's really clicking during a specific course of the game. But no, I wasn't too shocked by it. It was still cool to see. I felt like everyone showed out and did what they were supposed to do. Phil, I still don't know how I feel about the format. I still like the whole East-West thing. Maybe I'm too much of a traditionalist, but if they can replicate some of this same intensity while back in the old conference format, I think they'll have something special on their hands once again. Right.
No, and I do want to know, and hopefully we'll hear from the players just how they felt about the format, because if that's what's going to get them to maybe be a little bit more engaged or having a lot more fun with the All-Star game and wanting to put on a better show, then by all means, let's just keep doing that.
I mean, and I think that's the thing. If that incentive is there under this format, then by all means, go right on ahead with it. I felt like when we were kind of coming up, Phil, it was more commonplace for guys to really take pride in their respective conference. And then that was a big deal on All-Star Weekend. Like, hey, the Eastern Conference is the best. Here's why. But if this is what incentivizes these guys to play as hard as they did, or maybe even harder in the next All-Star weekend, come 2027, I'm all for it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I wish I planned the segue a little bit better, but let's just go ahead now and jump into past the All-Star break a little bit and focus a little bit on the Pistons' upcoming games, because they've got a couple, again, still going to be dealing with that Jalen Duren suspension for that first game against the New York Knicks, and then they're still going to have to wait a few more games for Isaiah Stewart to come back from his 7-game suspension for that fight in Charlotte against the Hornets. Let's focus on these next 3 games. Again, these are the 3 games before our next recording for the next week's episode. They're going to be on the road at the New York Knicks. Then they're going to stay on the road and travel to Chicago. But then they're back home, where they then take on the San Antonio Spurs, again, one of the top teams in the Western Conference. Real quickly, like we do every week, which of those 3 games are you most intrigued to watch, or one that you would shift all your schedule around and make plans to sit down and check it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of these games are interesting in their own right. You know, seeing Jaden Ivey once again in a new uniform, that's going to be odd. The New York game is obviously, there's a budding rivalry that's there, but the Spurs game probably is the one that intrigues me the most. San Antonio has really risen towards the top of the West over the course of this season. I feel like their timeline has really just been accelerated by the fact that they've had Wemby, and he's developed into everything you could have hoped for at this point in his career. So I'm interested to see how this Pistons team responds to everything, how this shorthanded Pistons team responds to everything. It'll be really unique to see. I'd like to see Isaiah Stewart in that game, just because I feel like he's so much of an enforcer, but hey, they'll have to survive without him. But this could be a very good matchup. This isn't necessarily a playoff matchup, because these teams would have to meet in the finals, but stranger things have happened.
Right, that would be
before.
a great finals matchup too.
Yeah, for sure. But I do very well think, with the trajectories that these two teams are on, this could be a matchup that we could see in the NBA Finals within the next 5 years or so. So, I'm really interested to see. The Spurs team is so different. They're so unique. They've got a lot of individual talent, and Mitch Johnson has done a really nice job of pulling it all together collectively. So, yeah, I want to see how Detroit responds to them.
Yeah, definitely want to give credit to Mitch Johnson and the San Antonio Spurs. They're only 3 games behind the Oklahoma City Thunder right now for tops in the West, which, again, is no shade to Oklahoma City, because they have fallen off a little bit from where they started out historically dominant to kick off the year. But, again, they're still way up there, along with Detroit, along with the San Antonio Spurs. I mean, there are a couple of teams up there that you could really argue right now, going in post All-Star break, that are still considered the favorites in their respective conferences. I really do like that Knicks matchup. I always think it's fun. I mean, even when Detroit kind of blows them out like they did in the last one, or if it's a little bit closer, there's just something about kind of staking your claim to, I'm the best team in the East right now, I'm the top dog right now, that I always enjoy. But again, the Pistons are going to have their hands full, really. I mean, this is just the really start to a pretty rough start to that All-Star break, or post All-Star break.
Yeah, for sure, Phil. We talked about it earlier this morning off air, but I think this stretch of the season is probably the most difficult, because the playoffs are now in sight now. But you want to keep guys healthy. You want to make sure guys get enough rest. But at the same time, you also want to make sure you develop a rhythm ahead of the postseason, because you need your chemistry and everything to be in place. You don't want to get into the playoffs on the wrong foot after limping into the postseason. It's not the way you want to end your year. Plus, I mean, staying atop the East is going to be a little bit difficult. The Boston Celtics are playing really well. I think they're 5.5 games back, but Jason Tatum could be returning sooner rather than later. So there's just a lot I think that the Pistons will have to do, but I do believe J.B. Bickerstaff and his coaching staff will do a good job at keeping things in line. And obviously they're going to have to find a way to survive a couple of games without their 2 anchors in the post.
Right. I think that's going to be the biggest key, is having guys to step up, like a guy like Paul Reed to really step in for Isaiah Stewart. I think he's going to, have to really do so, especially against some of these teams. I mean, I just want to go over these next 8 games. We'll get into some of those other games, obviously, in next week's episode, but this is their next 8 games. So, like I said, they're going to be traveling to New York to take on the Knicks, then on the road to take on the Bulls. They're back at home against the Spurs and the Thunder. Again, those are back-to-back games. Then they also will play host to the Cleveland Cavaliers to end the month. And then to kick off the month of March, they've got to travel to Orlando to take on the Magic, travel to Cleveland to take on the Cavs yet again, and then go back to San Antonio and take on the Spurs. That's just in an 8-game stretch. 2 weeks worth of of games, really.
Yep.
And they are playing against some of the top teams in both conferences.
Yep.
I mean, outside of that Chicago game, all of these teams are playoff teams.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is about to be a gauntlet. And it's tough, too, because guys are tired. Guys are exhausted during this time of the year. Like I said, the playoffs are in sight, so you're trying to maintain your seeding. But at the same time, you got to stay focused on the task at hand, which is trying to win every single night. And JB Bickerstaff, I think, has done a really good job of that. I feel like he's always emphasized that. We're not focused on the playoffs, or we're not focused on what's going to happen 6 months from now. We're worried about winning tonight.
Right.
So if they can maintain that same mindset and just continue to maintain the intensity that they've had, and I think keeping defense as their identity, I think it'll go a long way in keeping them at the top of the East for sure.
Absolutely. All right, well, let's move on to our next topic of discussion. And it was one that, we had spent quite a bit of time talking about earlier this season, and that is what's going to happen with Chris Paul. Yeah. We've, again, talked about it when he was released by the Los Angeles Clippers, one of his former teams, hoping to kind of maybe have like a swan song in his final year. Obviously, he got released, and they couldn't really figure out what to do with him. Couldn't really find his home with another team, and now, as of last week, he officially retired from NBA basketball after 21 years. What can be said about Chris Paul? I remember going to Grizzlies playoff games when they would take on the LA Clippers in his first time there, his first stint there, and just thinking, gosh, this guy knows how to play the game of basketball. He knows how to win every single time he's up the court, and I hate him. And there is something about that hatred that eventually grew to more admiration for him, and just realizing how hard it is to, again, be in the league for 21 years and also be at the top of your game for 21 years.
Yeah, Chris Paul was the ultimate floor general.
Right.
I think he was everything to this generation that Isaiah Thomas was and the generations before that. He was the quintessential point guard. He did a phenomenal job of distributing the ball. He made so many teams around him better. He made every team around him better. And his basketball IQ was just off the charts. I don't know or think that there's another guy whose like basketball brain rivals his as of like right now in terms of everything that he's been able to bring to the table.
Mm-hmm.
I think LeBron is definitely somebody you could put up there right now in the league, but he's seen it all and he did it all. He did it all, man. He did a phenomenal job. I think it's unfortunate that many people would probably try and define him by the fact that he never got a ring.
Right.
But that was through no fault of his own. Mm-hmm. He did a phenomenal job throughout his career, I think, of taking teams past their ceiling more nights than not. And Phil, the biggest thing that I think sticks with me is that 99.9% of athletes are unable to go out on their own terms.
Yeah.
Most guys, even whether you play in high school, college, the pros, most guys have to deal with the fact that, hey, I can't do this anymore. Whether it's the fact that their skills have just declined or their athleticism has declined. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes it's injuries, your body just not being able to withstand the rigors of a season anymore. Right. But Chris Paul, I think, deserves the luxury of being able to go out on his own. And the fact that he was essentially robbed of that and that it was taken away from him this year it's a travesty because it's not fair to him. I think he wanted one more year to be able to do the game, to be able to play the game that he loves and to do the job that he's loved and that he's done so well for more than 2 decades now. And for him to lose that at the expense of being disruptive, I still don't understand it. I think he's been a phenomenal leader. And this is a guy who, Phil, we've talked about it, brought the Clippers back into relevancy.
Absolutely.
Nobody was talking about the Clippers before that. I don't think they had much of any identity at all before that. They were very, very much in the Lakers' shadow. And he did a phenomenal job of making the Clippers cool.
Right.
Like, not only from just an NBA standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint. They were on slam covers. All of a sudden, Blake Griffin's jersey was selling. Mm-hmm. His was one of the highest selling jerseys. So it really is a shame that things got to as contentious of a point as they did between those two sides, because that's not what their foundation is all about. And someday his jersey is going to be up in the rafters. Right. It's ridiculous. So it's very sad to see his career end like this, but I do hope he's able to find some kind of peace in the latter half of his life, and he'll be able to do whatever he wants in terms of basketball. He can be a general manager if he wants to. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are many teams that would be quick to hire him as a head coach after a year or two. So I hope he's able to make peace with his playing career, because he had a phenomenal one, and I know he'll kill it in whatever he decides to do next.
Yeah, no, I was thinking he would be a great head coach just because he, one, cares about the game of basketball, and two, he's so smart. I mean, there's so many things that even us basketball fans or people that have followed the game for years and years that we don't pick up on, and then you just kind of see him do something you've never seen before, and you're like, how is he the first guy to do something like that? Or how have I just now picked up on something that you could possibly do? I mean, there's so many times there's a compilation on YouTube probably right now of times when Chris Paul knew the rules better than referees. I mean, I always think about that time. I believe when he was on Oklahoma City and they were playing Minnesota, somebody was checking into a game. It was Jeff Teague, I believe, was checking into a game, and he didn't have his jersey tucked in. And Chris Paul was like, that's a delay of game. That's a violation. Got his team 2 extra points just because he knew the rule book. And again, so many guys play the game of basketball at such a high level. Very few have that kind of intelligence and just, know it all about the game of basketball and really NBA rules in general. So again, it'll be kind of sad to see him go. I'm sure 13-year-old Phil is glad that there is an end in sight, because again, he wreaked havoc on my Memphis Grizzlies for so long. AJ, do you have a favorite Chris Paul, spot that he was in, or a team that maybe he was a part of?
Oh man,
there've been so many, I know.
I honestly would say, if you were to ask me a few years ago, Chris Paul for a long time was my favorite player. Right. And he still is one of my favorite players of all time. But growing up for an extended period, he was my favorite player in the NBA. If you would have asked me then, I would have said the New Orleans era. I just felt like he was so exceptional. He was brilliant out of the pick and roll.
And those uniforms were so good. Those teal. My gosh.
Oh, yeah. It was one of the first jerseys I ever received for Christmas.
Right.
He was going to get 2 points out of the pick and roll, regardless of how you split it. He was going to either get 2 free throws, get his teammate 2 free throws, or get a layup or a jumper for somebody. But to be honest, Phil, now looking at his career in retrospect, I would have to say those early Clippers years, because I think people forget that one of the biggest trades of all time did not happen that involved him. That trade was vetoed for him to go to the Lakers. And I don't want to say it's like a sign of failure, but for him to have taken that adversity and that frustration, because I'm sure he was just as upset about it as anybody, the fact that he couldn't play with Kobe Bryant, and to go across town and make the Clippers cool again.
Right.
I don't know if he'll ever get enough credit for doing that. And that's something that I don't think many superstars at that time would have been capable of doing. But he really brought them back to national relevancy and made them a really competitive team in the Western Conference. They were a team that many people had projected to make the finals multiple years. And it's a shame they never got there. But I would have to say those years. That was a remarkable job that he did. We talk about a lot of superstars and guys who can change the fortunes of a franchise, but there are very few who actually go on to do it. And sometimes that happens in large part because the foundation maybe is already there. But he's one of those guys. Him, Jason Kidd, when he got to New Jersey, there are a few guys who really changed the entire trajectory of a franchise. And he's a guy who did that for the Clippers, and he deserves to have his name in the rafters there and in New Orleans. Yeah, definitely. There are a couple of places I think that he could end up seeing his jersey retired when it's all said and done. But again, congrats again to Chris Paul. I'm sure you're definitely watching this right now. But again, just an incredible career. And yeah, if you've never seen old school Chris Paul highlights, definitely that's your homework for the day, I think, is just checking that out. Just go on YouTube, Chris Paul highlights. You'll find a trillion videos, I'm sure, there. And AJ, you mentioned that blockbuster trade that almost sent him to the Lakers instead of the Clippers. Well, that's a piece of NBA history that, if you're just checking into the NBA and maybe this is kind of your forefront into getting involved and paying closer attention to basketball, well, you probably don't know about that story, which is why we want to introduce a new segment where we sort of explain the inside outs of basketball, not just the history of it, but important teams, players, what the statistics mean, the different positions. That's kind of where we're going to be going with this first edition of this new segment. We don't have a name for it yet. It's TBD, but it's going to be sort of how we end most of our shows, if we've got time for it, obviously, where we explain a little bit more about the world of NBA basketball. So, AJ, you've got a whiteboard there that is super appropriate because we want to be able to break down everything, offenses, defenses, everything like that. So without further ado, let's explain the history of positions in the NBA. All right, so in basketball, there are 5 primary positions. So the first one of the main ones, is the point guard. The point guard is equivalent to what a quarterback is in football. They oversee both sides of the floor pretty much. They set the tone offensively. They're often the ones that you see on TV bringing the ball up the court, and they are the primary distributor oftentimes. Examples of these guys are Steve Nash, Isaiah Thomas, Jason Kidd, guys who are really good passers, really good ball handlers, and just really good leaders of their team. Their backcourt mate is the shooting guard. The shooting guard is oftentimes one of the primary scorers on whatever team they're on. They are very, very skilled, similar to the point guard, but they're a little more focused on creating offense for themselves. They run off of a lot of ball screens, but they're very, very, very active on the floor, and they really do a nice job of setting the tone as well. Primary shooting guards or quintessential examples are Kobe Bryant, Ray Allen, and somebody who people often refer to as the greatest of all time, Michael Jordan. He was a shooting guard and a terrific one in his own right. So those guys are very, very essential to a really good team. The small forward oftentimes is sort of like the liaison between the point guard and the shooting guard and the power forward and the center. They're somewhere in the middle, but they do a really nice job of just keeping things balanced. Small forwards are oftentimes really good ball handlers as well. Their IQ, their basketball IQ has to be really, really high. A lot of those guys can make shots all over the floor, and they play a very versatile role on most teams because they kind of have to do a little bit of everything. They have to rebound, they have to shoot, they have to pass, and they have to do whatever their team needs them to do during that portion of the game. So great small forwards are guys like Larry Bird, LeBron James, and Kevin Durant. Those are some of the best ones of all time. The front court consists of two positions, the power forward and the center. Both of these guys operate down in the post, and they do a phenomenal job of rebounding, protecting the paint, getting blocks, and scoring down there if necessary. The power forward is one of the guys who also sets the tone. He's oftentimes a little bit smaller than the center, but they do a really nice job of rebounding. And they can also oftentimes stretch the floor a little bit so they can make shots around this area, free throw line extended. And they provide a primary source of offense and defense. Some of the greatest power forwards of all time are considered to be like Tim Duncan and Kevin Garnett. Those are two of the primary ones. Tim Duncan was known as probably the greatest power forward of all time because not only of his versatility, but his steadiness. And that's a word that I think really encapsulates the power forward really well. The center position is, they are the anchor on the team. That's the best way to put it. Great centers consist of guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain. They're oftentimes the biggest guys on the team, but they're the most commanding. They get rebounds, they get blocks, but they also just set the tone completely. They set a lot of pick and rolls for the point guard, but they keep everything steady and they make sure to right the ship when things go awry. So those are the 5 positions on the floor. All of these guys intersect with one another. They all have to play their primary role. And with today's game, oftentimes, many of these guys now fill different roles for each other. There's a variety of roles. Positionless basketball is a really big thing. So oftentimes now, guys just sort of are playing in 5 spots on the floor. And now you have guys like centers, for example, Nikola Jokic in Denver. He'll play point guard and will initiate the offense from here. And a guy who came into the league as a point guard and who was often viewed as Denver's point guard, Jamal Murray, might start here, and he might receive a handoff from Jokic, and they get into their offense that way. But it's just a sign of the times. It's all about versatility and guys being able to do everything on the floor. Positionless basketball really is a real thing. It is important to have a primary position in the game and to understand your place within a team, but it's also important to not get too caught up in that because nowadays everyone can shoot, pass, and dribble. Everyone is tall, everyone's athletic, and everybody has a fill.
Yeah, no, I think it was important to really start off our sort of behind the basketball sort of explainer course segment just because it is important to realize that, yes, there are certain positions, you'll see certain guards have to make it to all-star games or, especially back in the day, you might have heard point guard, shooting, small forward, shooting guard, center, power forward, all those things. And now you're seeing just what looks like 10 centers out on the floor at one given time. So again, it is just kind of explaining what that really is all about and then also just how the game has kind of again, adapted and moved and created, even more interesting dynamics on the basketball court. So again, really appreciate you breaking everything down for us, AJ. And like I said, these are going to be a lot more frequent once we hit the off season, I'm sure. But when we do have time, we want to make sure that everybody watching isn't as confused about the game as maybe they started when they first started watching NBA. We want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. We all know what we're talking about, and hopefully we're bringing in the next generation of fans in there who maybe have never given basketball a second thought, and now that they understand it a little bit more, are going to become big time fans. So we're just hopeful about that.
For sure.
All right, great stuff. Well, AJ, always enjoy the time together, and I want to thank everybody so much for tuning into this latest edition of NBA.